fellow nerds. Welcome back. We've got another great episode of The Present Illness today. This is the podcast where two physicians try to make sense of a world that's a little febrile and very underdiagnosed. I'm Arghavan, Salles, a surgeon scientist, and your friendly neighborhood doom scroller in residence.
I'm Alyssa, Burgart, an anesthesiologist and bioethicist who tracks news and health law like their EKGs, full of spikes and surprises. The Present Illness is where we dig into public health, politics, culture, and ethics with a scalpel in one hand and a meme in the other.
Thanks again to everyone who's listening. We really appreciate the feedback that folks are sending us. And if you enjoy this episode, we would love for you to also share feedback with us. Or even if you don't, we also want to hear critical feedback. Extra love to our subscribers and followers, and a warm welcome to anyone who just stumbled in from ruining the workplace as a lady or a
Let me tell
female,
you.
or whatever term you would like to use to describe yourself.
I'll tell you what, I have walked into the workplace multiple times this week and I just decimated it. It was great.
I hope they appreciated it.
I hope so.
It's such a service.
Listen, folks, we are glad you're here. Let's get into it.
So, we are recording this episode on November 13th. And one of the things you and I have been wanting to talk about and haven't yet addressed is the Epstein of it all. Given that there were, 20,000 some odd emails that were released yesterday, I think today's as good a time as any to discuss that little situation, if you will. So, I thought I
Well,
might just start by... go ahead.
And maybe what we should do, and I think we've maybe been remiss in previous episodes, obviously for anybody who, is concerned about listening to topics related to Epstein, like I understand how it can be really difficult to get away from this. And especially if you're a survivor or if you're, impacted by someone's experience as a survivor, like this episode may not be for you. And that's okay. We want you to take care of yourself. We want to make sure that you do what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. Because this is everywhere right now. And yeah, I fully appreciate how hard that is for folks who don't like hearing about this topic for very good reason. So what I thought I might do is start by just summarizing at least some of the things that we know so far about what came out this week. And then I think there will be many offshoots out of all of these things. The first three emails, so a lot of people have focused on the first three emails that were released. And these included an email from 2011 when Jeffrey Epstein sent an email to Ghislaine Maxwell. In that email, he said that that he wants her to know that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. And also that Trump had spent apparently hours at his house with, the name is redacted, but it is everyone's belief that that person is Virginia Giuffre. So what people are taking, and then she writes back, I had noticed that, or I've been thinking about that, is what she says.
And Virginia Giuffre, we mentioned before, recently posthumously published a memoir about her experiences, and in relation to that story coming out to even greater attention is part of how, for example, Prince Andrew lost his, like the royal family removed his fancy titles and whatnot.
Exactly. Yeah. And she, her book came out, I think it's 2 weeks ago now, about that was published posthumously. I just want to, in case people want the actual wording, I did pull up that email, that one that I was just talking about. Jeffrey Epstein says to Ghislaine Maxwell, I want you to realize that dog hasn't, start over. I want you to realize that dog that hasn't barked is Trump. And then they have the name redacted, and it says victim. Spent hours at my house with him. He has never been mentioned, police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. And she writes back, Ghislaine writes back, I've been thinking about that. So that was the first of the three emails that was released. And what people have taken away a lot of different things from this one. One is, a lot of folks have been talking about the fact that there was a young girl who spent hours in Epstein's house with Trump, and what does that mean and what might have occurred there. It is important to note that Virginia Giuffre does not talk about him in her book and has not ever accused him of any wrongdoing. So if indeed it is her who's referenced, it doesn't sound like anything inappropriate happened in that specific instance. The other part of that email, which is that dog that hasn't barked, is Trump. Some people have interpreted this as meaning that Trump hasn't like outed Epstein, but others are suggesting that it's because I think it's a perhaps a literary reference, which seems like a stretch, but for this audience,
I'm
but
sorry. Based on the lack of punctuation in pretty much every single one of these emails, I think we can rule out literary references, but I'm open to hearing alternative points of view.
yeah, that's a fair point. The suggestion that has been made is that he's referencing that perhaps Trump is actually an informant.
Mm.
And that's why Trump hasn't been saying anything because he's already said the things to the police.
Hmm.
So that's a suggestion. Of course, it's a suggestion that others have made that Trump was an informant. Um, of course, we don't know, but that's probably like the key points about that first email. Then the second of the first three emails is an email between Epstein and Michael Wolff, where so Michael Wolff was a journalist, and if people who've been following the Epstein story, you see Michael Wolff everywhere. He is constantly talking about conversations he had with Epstein and what he knew about Trump and a lot of things. And what has been, I think, surprising to some people is that is his communications to with Epstein that have been revealed in these emails. So one is an email in which Epstein says to Wolf that Trump obviously knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. And this is important because Trump has denied that he knew anything about Epstein's criminal activities, which involve trafficking girls and young women. But according to that email, and it's coming from Epstein, so take it for what it's worth. But according to Epstein, he says that Trump knew. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm going to keep listening.
Okay. Then the third email, or actually, like, let me see if I can just tell you the exact wording. So the second email, basically, that's very short. And again, this is from Epstein to Michael Wolff. There's something that's redacted, and then you see Mar-a-Lago, more text that's redacted, and then it says, Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member ever. I think he's talking about membership at Mar-a-Lago. And then he says, of course he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. So that's the exact wording
To
there.
stop what?
Trafficking girls. I mean, there was what we learned a few months back is that everyone knows that that Trump and Epstein had been friends at some point, right? There's lots of video and photos of them together at parties and so on. There's that famous note that Trump wrote that was in Epstein's 50th birthday book, referencing their friendship and talking about keeping secrets and all of that. Some believe that the fallout in their relationship related to a real estate deal where they were bidding on the same property. However, with regard to this whole kicking Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago type thing, you see in this email that, which by the way, people bring up as evidence that Trump was not part of this criminal activity or unaware of this criminal activity. People will say, oh, Trump cut his ties with Epstein. Now, again, it could be because of that real estate deal. What came out over the summer was that Trump referenced Epstein's um, trafficking of some young girls as stealing them from
Mhm.
him at Mar-a-Lago. And again, he specifically mentioned, somebody asked him about Virginia Giuffre, and he said, yes, Epstein stole her, as though these young girls were property
Property.
owned by these men. And so it's unclear, is what I'm trying to say, exactly what the riff was. Was it the real estate thing? Was it Trump saying, hey, stop trafficking girls from my girls, just to be clear, underage children from my club? But clearly there was some sort of rift that developed. And so the third email that was in this initial 3 that were released is also between, Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein, and Michael Wolff says to Epstein, "I have CNN planning to ask Trump tonight," or sorry, "I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterwards." Epstein says, "If we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be?" So just to be
Oh,
clear, this
I I read that one and I was like, "That's a lot of that's" it was weird. Like, as a journalist, like, reading all that stuff, I was like I mean, I'm not a journalist, I'm saying for a journalist
Yeah.
to give the sort of direction that's in this email, I guess you're gonna read it. I was like, "What?"
Well, even the reason I paused there is to say, okay, why is a journalist giving a heads up to a criminal that there's going to be a question potentially about him? And then why is that criminal writing back, if we were able to craft an answer to him, what do you think it should be? And then Michael Wolff, I think this is what you're referring to, writes back with a fairly lengthy response. "I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you, Mr. Pedophile Criminal." Obviously, that last part was not in the email. Then he goes on, "Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and he has gotten a raw deal and he is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime." So this is a journalist, to your point, giving advice to a criminal. This is in 2015. Folks might recall that Epstein was originally convicted, I think it was 2009, it was 2008 or 2009. So this is years after that. And Michael Wolff is giving him advice on how to take advantage of this situation. Now, Michael Wolff is not the only reporter who is in the emails that were released yesterday. There's also a man named Landon Thomas, who at the time was a New York Times reporter. And he has some very interesting exchanges as well with Trump, uh, in some cases relating to what reads to me as Landon Thomas's concern about Trump's impending election and a desire for Epstein to release some information that might be harmful to Trump's campaign. But in these exchanges, some of the interesting things that Epstein says are, I mean, I was surprised by this. Maybe other people wouldn't be surprised by this, but I was surprised at how negatively Epstein talked about Trump. Again, these were friends. At some point, I think Epstein said something like it was Trump was his best friend or something like that. But in one email, he says this one actually is not clear who it's sent to. But he says, "Your world," Epstein says, "your world does not understand how dumb he really is," meaning Trump. "He will blame everyone around him for bad results." He's got in a couple other places, Epstein says, this is to Larry Summers. He says, "Recall, I've told you I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump, not one decent cell in his body. So, yes, dangerous."
I mean, truly, when Jeffrey Epstein thinks you're a bad person, that really says something.
Yeah, I don't think it says anything good, you know? The
No.
other email the other email
God.
that he along those lines that he had sent to Landon Thomas, the New York Times, the at the time New York Times reporter, was about Trump. He says he feels alone and is nuts. "I told everyone from day one, evil beyond belief, mad, and most thought I was speaking metaphorically. It's obvious he could crack Stormy Daniels' question, like question mark, lies after lies after lies." So not only did they kind of just separate their social circles, it sounds like there was great animosity between the two. And I think what has stood out to me and the reason I wanted to talk about those segments specifically is, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein was a terrible person. Obviously, I don't know that anyone who would I don't know that anyone would really disagree with that statement. And he thinks Donald Trump is absolutely horrible. So like, what are we
Well,
doing
yeah,
here?
The other thing that's, I think, interesting is when you look at sort of the cult of Donald Trump and, like, people who really revere him, and yet there's such a huge overlap in, the MAGA community and whatever, who are, like, very, release the Epstein files," like, and I'm very curious to see as this information emerges, one, what cohesive story is going to come out about it, and will presumably there will be information that will shed immense light on not only Donald Trump, but many, many people. I would assume across both parties and
Mhm.
all sorts of people who are rich and powerful and have done whatever the hell they wanted. I'm very curious to see if, based on what comes out about Trump, if it is going to pierce this sort of cultish veneer. I'm very curious. I'm not confident.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point too, because I saw a lot of people. Again, I'm the doom scroller here, and so I saw a lot of people when I was scrolling yesterday, almost like rejoicing that this was the beginning of the end, that it's all over, all these kinds of things. Now, of course, some of that is intentionally inflammatory to get likes and engagement and whatever. I'm sure some of that is engagement farming, but it did seem like a lot of people felt like this changed something. And I'll be honest that, we've talked about this at least privately, and I think once maybe on the pod, that I don't think so. Like, I would be delighted. I would be delighted, let me be clear, if people started to care that this man is a sexually abusive person. I'd be delighted for people to care about that. And they have not shown any interest in that issue when it comes to this man before. I don't expect that they're going to now. Like, honestly, there's nothing too surprising in these emails. What I found most surprising was, one, how much Jeffrey Epstein seemed to dislike Trump, and two, how poorly written so many of the emails are, including the emails from Larry Summers, the former president of Harvard, like one of the most elite institutions in the entire world. And this man cannot seem to write coherent emails, at least not consistently. And keep in mind, for folks who don't know Larry Summers, in 2005, while he was president of Harvard, he attended a conference that was specifically about women and minorities in science. Okay. At that conference, he gave some suggestions as to why women are underrepresented in science. And one of his three suggestions was that we just have less innate ability for science. And that led to a lot of pushback. Understandably, reasonably so. He ended up having to step down from his position as the president of Harvard University. And don't worry, he's doing fine. He's still got an endowed professorship at Harvard
Oh.
University. Poor guy, suffering. He was canceled so hard. He was also the director of the National Economic Council. He's an economist. After having stepped down from his position as president at Harvard. And I'm going to share what he wrote in at least one of his emails to Jeffrey Epstein, because it is surprising that this is how this person would talk.
Oh my god. So, speaking of Larry Summers, I just saw that there's a piece that came out earlier this year that's called "The 20th Anniversary of Larry Summers' Remarks and the Debut of Cancel Culture." So again, like, seriously, you don't have a right to be the dean of a university. Like, calm down. Get just you're fine.
Just okay. So this is one of the emails that Larry Summers sent to Jeffrey Epstein. This is in 2017, which is relevant. It's a full 12 years after he made those absurd comments at that conference at Harvard. I'm just reading the email verbatim, okay? SoftBank deputy guy I liked and seemed aware and honest, R.E. son. Lots of slathering to Saudis. I yipped about inclusion. I observed that half the IQ in world was possessed by women without mentioning they are more than 51% of population. Dot, dot, dot. Mnuchin plumbs new depths. War seems more likely than I used to think. DJT is world's luckiest guy in terms of opposition, economy, etc. Still think his world will collapse. I'm trying to figure why American elite think if you murder your baby by beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission to Harvard, but hit on a few women 10 years ago and you can't work at a network or think tank, all caps, do not repeat this insight sent from my iPad. So,
I mean, to be fair though, calling that an insight feels like a stretch.
yeah, I wasn't even sure. I wasn't sure which insight he was referring to. Like, which
I didn't
part
hear
of this,
one.
yeah,
Wow.
which part of this email was an insight? I am not sure. But I do want to just lift up or push down, whatever the right terminology is, but I want to comment on two specific parts of this email. So, one is the statement about I observed that half the IQ in world was possessed by women without mentioning they're more than 51% of the population. That's clearly an insult, right? He's saying, like, if you divide up half the intelligence over more than half the population, then women are lower on average intelligence than men. That's what he was trying to say, but he wanted credit, it seems like, for not making that explicit in whatever comments. I don't even know what comments he observed to who, in what context. I don't know, without mentioning. Again, mentioning to who, I don't know. But he seemed to want credit for not being explicit about his insult of women's intelligence, even though this is a man who basically denied that he had ever said anything harmful about women. And actually, people supported him in 2005, including women, were like, oh no, his comments were more nuanced. Da, 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 da. Okay. But here he is 12 years later, basically saying the same thing. Women are stupider than men. That's what he's saying. And he wants
It
credit for,
turns out just because you work at Harvard, it doesn't mean you get smarter over time.
and it doesn't mean that you have any ability to reflect on your own errors. In judgment and in cognition and everything. The other point is right at that last part, right before his do not repeat this insight, where he's talking about basically cancel culture. You can't hit on women 10 years. If you hit on women 10 years ago, now you can't get a job at a network or a think tank. That's what he's
Also,
referring to.
also, no one has a right to a job at a network or a think tank. You're not like it's actually not you don't like deserve it. That's not really how this works.
I thought it was
Yeah.
owed to you if you were like a man. Is that a no? So anyway,
I can see how this gentleman might think that.
exactly right. That is, I mean, that's what I take from that, right? Like that he feels that he was owed opportunities, or that men in general are owed opportunities that should not be denied because they quote unquote hit on women 10 years ago. And I want to share something Jillian Brandstetter posted on Blue Sky. She said, my takeaway from every new Epstein revelation is that some powerful people victimized many powerless young women, many more knew, some actively enabled it, and we're still being told that Me Too and accountability for sexual violence have gone too far.
I mean, it's embarrassing that people make that argument. It's embarrassing. I am embarrassed to be part of this society. Um, truly, the idea that somehow folks who rape teenagers should be beyond reproach. I don't. Yeah. Oh no. Me too. The ladies ruining the workplace. Ah.
Yeah, because we have definitely ruined the workplace, to the extent that that has involved asking to be treated like human beings in the workplace. Um, but what
Or
he
anywhere. Treated like a human being anywhere.
just asking,
Anywhere.
it's asking too much, Alyssa.
Because let me tell you, the people who are raping children for their own sick pleasure are also I do not expect them to respect people of any age anywhere.
Yeah. No, that's right. Well, one transgression means you don't really, a transgression like that means you don't really believe in rules and laws and decency. And so you're going to transgress in, typically people who do that will transgress in numerous other ways. Um, but I think that this idea, I mean, you and I both know because we work in this space, but this idea that accusations from women ruin men's careers really holds no water. I mean, even if you just look
I
at,
wish it would ruin their careers. Please ruin their
we have been
careers.
begging for any abusive man's career to be ruined, and it's
Any
not
accountability.
happening.
Any.
It's not happening. We have in the White House, right? A man who was found by a jury to have sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll. And he is not only president, he is asking the Supreme Court to weigh in on that decision so that he doesn't have to pay her the money that a jury said that he owed her for defamation. I mean, if you want any more evidence, like what more evidence do you want that Me Too accusations don't
I mean,
bring down careers? The man is in the
but
highest office in the land.
also we should take a moment. I mean, E. Jean Carroll, hon, if you're listening, you're a hero. You're a hero.
Absolutely. She's a queen. I mean, she had to wait a long time to get her justice, but now she's reveling in it, as she should. I mean, she was immensely harmed by this man, and she did
Mhm.
an extremely brave thing by coming
Mhm.
forward. Um, and yes, she was awarded some amount of money. But again, look, her abuser is in the White House. Like, this is not, if this is what, I don't
If
understand how
any
anyone,
if any person in America has the right to say not my president, it's E. Jean Carroll.
that's right. That's right. And I just think it's hard for me to believe anyone making a case for Me Too having gone too far when this is the reality that we live in. So getting back to the emails,
Okay, back to the emails.
I just, like I'm a completionist, so like there are more things I want to share. Um, One other person who had some interesting comments about, about Trump that was in there is a woman named Kathy Rumler, and she was the White House counsel under Barack Obama, and for reasons unknown to me, she is communicating with Epstein via email. So she writes to Epstein that Trump is gross. Epstein says he's worse in real life and up close. Um, and in a separate email, Epstein says, I know how dirty Donald is. So just again, reinforcing this
Oh,
idea.
the T-shirts make themselves. I'm gonna go.
Like,
I bet you that if I go to Etsy right now, I bet you I can find. I bet somebody's already on that market.
yeah, I'm sure people are so fast at coming up with these shirts for things like this. The other thing I wanted to just summarize for folks is what seemed to be the most kind of incriminating pieces of information, aside from what I've already shared. There was an email from some woman to Epstein in an exchange about when she was supposed to come over to his house. And you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
Sorry. I'm laughing because I literally just went to Etsy and there is literally that quote. I know how dirty Donald is. For $10.43, you too can have a t-shirt that says that. It's on sale right now. So I couldn't, I'm sorry, I couldn't help but look. I found the t-shirt. People on Etsy, great job.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that update. Okay, so what I was saying was, in
I'm
terms of
sorry.
in terms of information that supports this assertion that Donald is dirty, um, one of the series of emails was an exchange from a young, presumably young, I don't know her age, but a woman to Epstein making arrangements for her to come visit his house. And she's asking about what time she should get there, and she says, "I don't want to come early to find Trump in your house." And I just want to point out that that was in 2017 when Trump was
Oh,
the president of the United States. So there was
I just threw up a little bit in my mouth though.
very appropriate. Yeah. And
Vomit emoji.
do you know that that will get you a community guideline violation on TikTok? Don't use that emoji. But anyway, ask me how I know.
Really?
Mm.
Huh.
But you can say all sorts of bigoted things, and those are fine. But vomit emoji, don't do. Anyway,
Huh.
this was just after in this was December of 2017, and in November of 2017, Trump and Epstein had Thanksgiving together. Um, again, while Trump was the president of the United States. There was an email that Epstein
Maybe
had
they were maybe they were trying to patch up their relationship.
yeah, just become besties again. Why not? Um, they missed each other. So there's an email that Epstein had sent to that New York Times reporter, Landon Thomas, where what my impression of the email exchange is Landon is asking, is there any dirt essentially on Trump? And Epstein says that to ask his houseman, he refers to this person as a houseman. I don't know who that is.
Is that
Um,
like a pool boy, like a grown-up pool boy? Do you become a houseman?
houseman.
Is that when a pool boy becomes a man?
That must be what it is. He says, have them ask my houseman about Donald almost walking through the door, leaving his nose print on the glass as young women were swimming in the pool, and he was so focused he walked straight into the door. Yeah, you could say that's just creepy. It's not evidence of crime, but it is very, very creepy. Yeah, it was another email exchange between Epstein and Landon Thomas, where Landon says, "Now everyone coming to me thinking I have juicy info on you and Trump because of this," which was then this was a quote from Trump about Epstein. But the response from Epstein is, "Would you like photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen?" Pretty gross. And then Landon Thomas writes back to give Landon Thomas some credit. He writes back, I am serious, man, for the good of the nation. Why not try to get some of this out there? This is in December 2015. And um, Epstein replies with a link and then says, my 20-year-old girlfriend in 93 that after 2 years I gave to Donald. Right. So again,
Oh,
hmm
oh,
yeah, yeah, very much
oh,
giving the ick.
gross.
So again, talking this language of like gave and stole, right? It's very in line with the trafficking that Epstein engaged in, where these girls and women were property. So he had this quote unquote girlfriend, as how he refers to her, and then he gifted her to Donald. Um, and I think those are yes, I just checked my list. Those are all the highlights from yesterday's emails that I wanted to really make sure that we talked about. I do want to, since we were talking about this ownership and idea owning these girls, that do want to mention that in the birthday book that we briefly talked about earlier, Epstein's 50th birthday book, where there was that note from Trump about enigmas that never age, and where he says, "May every day be another." Um, secret. Anyway, another wonderful secret is what he says. Um,
Again, so literary.
it's
Sorry.
worth noting that Trump and others have denied that he wrote that letter. Make of that what you will. But I would also point out that Trump has lied about many, many things. Make of that what you will. But back to the birthday book. So there was another page in the birthday book where there's a photo of how like on the game shows when we were kids, they would have like a like a big check that people would get as like a prize,
Mhm,
it'd be like, "Oh,
mhm.
we're gifting you $100,000," but they give them like a giant check to hold up like it's a nice PR opportunity. Okay, so there's a photo of some people holding up this giant check, and the text underneath it says that, Epstein had sold a quote unquote "fully depreciated," and then the name is redacted, to Donald Trump for $22,500. A fully depreciated woman in this context would be a woman who has, exceeded the age at which she was optimally attractive, right? So you can infer based on the fact that this is Epstein, we're talking about that it was a girl who had become 18 or 20 or, who knows what age. I'm sure that they would say this is all a joke, but who jokes about selling a young person to another person, and who jokes about depreciation of women as though we are objects? So depreciation, for folks who don't know, is like an accounting term. When you buy a device, when you buy a car, when you buy a printer, they each year it depreciates in value by some amount. And you could account for that in your books when you're looking at your assets and your revenues and so on. So this objectification of women happened in numerous different ways in this sphere, in this circle. There are who knows how many other people, to your earlier point, implicated in all of this. I don't know. Again, there were 20,000 emails released yesterday. I certainly have not read all of them. Um, but what,
My
but,
and I just my sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, but what we do see and have seen for years now, in all the information that's come out about Epstein and his criminal activities, is that a lot of very high powered men were involved with him, interacted with him, part of his social circle. Larry Summers, who I mentioned, again, the former president of Harvard, was emailing with Epstein as late as March 2019. So, well after even more really incriminating information. I mean, even, I don't remember the exact date of his conviction, but like this was only months before his death that they were still exchanging emails. And it just goes to show how these folks who are in power have a very small world. We have journalists at places like the New York Times. We have the president of the United States, right? And we have the guy who was the former president of Harvard. We have, again, very high powered people all interacting with someone who carried out one of the largest, if not the largest, pedophilia trafficking schemes ever. And it was referred to kind of as an open secret. I don't know. I'm not putting thoughts in anybody's head. I don't know exactly what any of these people did or didn't know, but it seems unlikely that you could have close contact with this man for a sustained period of time and not have any idea that there were these horrible, illegal, extraordinarily harmful activities going on.
I tell you, my what I keep thinking about as you're, reading these emails, and especially that depreciation one. Just thinking of the survivors who, again, like this story, they've obviously been advocating to try to get this information out, but it's really been. I mean, I wish it was surprising. It's not surprising, but that the survivors' voices in so many of these stories are just entirely absent. Um, we really hardly have heard, the dominating things in the headlines really have to do with Epstein and Trump, and I understand that, but fundamentally, and the obsession in the manosphere, in the magosphere about Epstein seems to really be focused on, oh, we're going to get that guy, as opposed to we genuinely care and want to prevent harm to children and to women. And I think that in so much of what you and I have talked about in recent episodes, in terms of attitudes like Joel Webbins, attitudes that are very anti women being in the workplace, anti women being outside of the home. Um, these are all interconnected ideas, and so when we don't care about survivors and we do not center the needs and goals of survivors, I think that we just make the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, but centering survivors would require so many things that are not currently happening in our society. It would require believing people who have been harmed when they are brave enough, courageous enough to come forward. It would require holding abusers accountable, which we have just not committed to doing as a society. And it can be at any level. You can think back to, I was thinking back to the origin of Time's Up and the 700,000 farm workers who had written in support of the women in Hollywood. And we're not supporting them either. We're not supporting people at any level who are experiencing harm at the hands of abusive people. It is extraordinarily difficult to get justice. Part of what was so upsetting to me about that Women in the Workplace, the Women Ruining the Workplace podcast that the New York Times put out last week, was the one of the conservative women on there, a woman named Helen Andrews,
Oh
multiple.
God, the great feminization. God, she sounds like a nutbag.
Oh, yes, that's a good adjective, I think, for her. Um, what was really I mean, there was much that she said that was very frustrating to me, but one of the things that really got my goat, if you will, is that she multiple times referenced Title IX as being like some sort of institution that overwhelmingly serves survivors and at the cost of the people who have harmed
Oh,
them.
I wish. My God, that would be amazing. I wish that Title IX was doing that.
I think that the reason I wanted to mention that here is one, it's obviously quite relevant to our conversation, but also you and I both are well aware because of the class that we teach together on campus sexual assault, how much of a disservice Title IX often is to survivors. And so this woman was not only claiming that Title IX basically is unfair to the accused abusers, but also that our entire justice system is becoming like Title IX because of women. That's part of how we're ruining the workplace. Yes, exactly. The look on your face. For our listeners, she's perplexed. Yeah, because it makes no sense. Because that's not how Title IX works. That's not how our legal system works. I mean, you could ask anyone, including Amber Heard, and you would see that that's not how it plays out. And so for her to sit there and suggest, much as Larry Summers did, that, essentially Me Too has gone too far, um, to me just showed how ignorant she is about everything in that space. Like, she clearly does not
I
know
mean,
anything about Title
she
IX or
hates,
sexual
but
violence.
if you hate women, then none of this matters. And she clearly hates women. I mean, isn't she the one in the interview where um the guy that was in it kept being like, "Is there anything about women that's likable?" And she like basically couldn't answer. She was like, "Well, not really."
Well, that's correct.
Like,
Well, actually, it was
she
Leah
doesn't even like
Sargent.
herself.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, Leah Sargent was the other conservative woman who was on there, and she asked Helen, you've talked a lot about feminine vices. Are there any feminine virtues?
Oh, that's right. Feminine virtues. Ugh.
Right. Which at some point, by the way, this article or the way that it was written on the website, which was the transcript of the podcast, started out as did women ruin the workplace? Then it was did liberal feminism ruin the workplace? Then it became did feminine vices ruin the workplace?
Guys, the people who've ruined the workplace are toxic, abusive people who treat other people like shit. That is what ruins the workplace. I mean, come on. Are you
No,
fucking kidding me?
it's the women demanding respect, Alyssa. It's the women demanding equal
Well, you
pay.
can't say anything around here anymore.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Can't even be a man anymore. They don't even allow Y chromosomes in through the door. Anyway, so in that part of the conversation that you're thinking of, Leah had asked Helen about what she views as feminine virtues because she says, in your piece, you wrote a lot about feminine vices, but are there any feminine virtues? And Ross Douthat is the one who has to answer that question because Helen essentially refuses to do so. And Ross says, well, I think she's talking about like caring and nurturing. I mean, whatever, the stereotypical things that women are supposed to be good at, but we're mainly good at because we're socialized to be good at them. Um, and then Leah goes back again to Helen and says, but Helen, do you have anything to say here? And she's basically like, well, Ross said it. So yeah, that was
So embarrassing.
very embarrassing. And I will say that I had a video I'd posted about this, and you know, multiple people were like, but isn't she working? And I do want to clarify that I think, I don't know Helen. We're not like
I
friends.
mean, this is the thing, right? This is the thing about, these conservative women voices who spend all of their time criticizing women being part of society and women being part of the workplace because literally, I mean, it's a catch 22. The only reason that they are able to make such sort of arguments is because they had access to education. They're able to get a bank account. They're able to publish things in and get interviews in public media spaces. Like the this does not your opportunities as a conservative woman do not exist without feminism. They do not exist.
Yes, but that's not the problem, Alyssa. See, the problem is there's just too many women.
Educate me.
There's too
Educate me.
many women taking advantage of feminism. So I think that's what Helen would argue. were I to try to channel her based on having read her essay, The Great Feminization, and then listening to or having read the transcript of the
I
podcast,
read it. It was gross.
it was, yeah, not an essay I recommend. But I think she would argue that the issue is not any one woman. Like, she has a right to be a writer and be in the public sphere as one woman. The problem comes when you have too many women, right? That's how I interpret her take on the great feminization, that when you have too many women in a workplace, then we ruin it for everyone. And then what I also really liked about that, if there's anything I liked, I would say about that conversation, was the section where they're talking about veterinary medicine. Because I think Leah is the one who brings up the example of, like, well, most veterinarians are women. So what about that, Helen? And Helen's like, yeah, I don't know. It hasn't fully collapsed as a profession. And you're like, yeah, because women don't actually ruin the workplace. She did try to make an argument that the private equity buyout of many veterinary medicine practices is because there's so many women in veterinary medicine, because women don't want to own our own practices. This is an actual argument that she made. But then look at, like, urgent cares, or look at hospitals that are also being bought out by private equity that women have not historically owned, and I do not think own in great numbers. And then maybe your real problem that you're identifying is private equity taking over everything and making everything worse, not actually that women who went to school for many years and are underpaid as veterinarians are the actual problem. But I did like that she had to admit that veterinary medicine had not collapsed, despite the fact that there are a lot of women in that profession. She didn't have an explanation, really.
I mean, but this is the thing that's so hilarious to me is like the abject lack of any sort of reflexive logic to be like, but is it that there's too many men? I mean, it's so funny to me, right? And I'm not arguing that there's too many men in the workplace. I'm just saying it's so hilarious to me that somebody with a straight face is like, well, there's too many ladies. And that's the problem. That's, it's ruining everything. Where it's like, but what if there weren't enough? What if that's the problem?
Mm.
Maybe that's why workplaces, we really just need more ladies or more trans people. We need more people who we just more diversity. Maybe it turns out that's actually better. I don't know. Maybe it's
No,
that
you don't
it's
say.
only ruined. Maybe it's only that it's ruined the workplace for people who've had abject access to power and didn't have to think about anything that they said or did
Mm-hmm.
outside of the home. Maybe that's actually the problem. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know.
Just,
I'm just spitballing here.
yeah, just
Maybe I should
spitballing.
write an essay about it.
I would read it. Anyway, so yeah, so that was, I mean, there's a lot. We could spend a whole episode talking about that podcast, but it does relate very closely to some of the things that are present in these emails that we talked about, and the problem that exists, which is why people don't believe women, and why it's been so hard for the Epstein survivors, like all survivors, to get any semblance of justice. I mean, I think our government should be thoroughly ashamed that they had to hold their own press conference on the steps of the Capitol to say, hey, it's been 20 years and we've been waiting for justice here, and we want these files released. We want the names out there. And if you do not release them, we will. I mean, how thoroughly embarrassing that our government has let these women down so terribly that they wanted to, or they felt that they needed to, have a public press conference to put some pressure on our legislators to do the right thing. And I should note before we close out this conversation that last time we talked about Adelita Grijalva having not been
Mhm.
sworn in. She was sworn in. And yesterday,
Mhm.
the day before our conversation, they did have a vote on that discharge petition, and they did have 218 votes to move forward, despite the fact, mind you, that Donald Trump was pressuring the Republicans who were voting for that discharge petition, including having a private meeting with Lauren Boebert yesterday, again, to try to pressure her into changing her vote. And say what you will about any of those people, but they held fast to their principles on this vote. So we got the 218 votes, and there will apparently be a vote in the House either next week or the first week of December. I've seen conflicting information about releasing the files that they have on Epstein. And it should be, just in case folks in the audience don't know and are confused, these emails that came out yesterday are not part of the Department of Justice or FBI information on Epstein. These came from Epstein's estate through a separate effort. So that's why we got that information. So, obviously more to come on this story, but I, like you, will be curious to see what happens on the conservative side of the aisle. Um, and I think it's likely they'll continue to do what they have, which is to downplay and say, well, no, actually, what these emails suggest is that our president did nothing wrong, and this is a Democratic hoax, and all those kinds of things that they've been saying. I fully expect that to continue. I would love to see accountability here, and I don't know that we will.
Yeah, and I think we would be remiss. This is one case, right? It's one high profile case. Um, People are being trafficked all over the world right now, today. People are being abused today. Um, and they will never get this sort of attention. Their cases will never get this sort of attention. And there's so many aspects um, of what happens with sexual assault, with child sexual assault, that w- sh- shows up in hospitals and clinics. And
Mhm.
I'm sure that you and I will spend more time in a future episode talking about like why we care, why you and I care about these kinds of cases. And I think that um, folks are probably starting to get our vibe. We are really interested in looking at what is happening in society and what does that mean for our health and well-being. What does that? How is it that the things that are happening are a reflection or whatever of the experiences that patients are having, that people are having in trying to live their lives. And this, if we continue to bungle this situation, it's so embarrassing. So I'm really hoping that these files come out because I want there to be justice for the survivors, because I want people in the highest levels of government to be held accountable for their behavior. And I don't care what party you're in, I want you to be held accountable. I don't care what your job is, I want you to be held accountable because you should not be able to abuse people and get away with it. Um, and Obviously, it is taking a very, very, very long time to get any semblance of justice for survivors in this case, and unfortunately, for people like Virginia Dufresne, who has died, she will not have the benefit of seeing what is happening now and what I hope will come in the weeks to come. Um, but yeah, I think this case, I'm primarily interested in it as a reflection of the changes that we continue to hope to see throughout society to actually take care of people in this society as opposed to let folks who are in power do whatever they want.
And I 100% agree. And I think others have pointed out, and I agree, that the fact that everything that was in these emails was written in emails just goes to show how little any of these individuals expected to ever have to face accountability. I mean, it's just
I mean,
quite
people are
clear.
also dumb about emails. People don't understand that everything you put in an email can be subpoenaed. I mean, these are, okay. So yes, I agree with you. These folks clearly did not expect to ever have a, you know, magnifying glass put on them, which I can understand thinking that based on the way that we've treated so many other instances of abuse. Also, these people they seem really dumb. Like there's so many dumb things in these emails. I'm like, if I wrote an email, like I'd be fired.
Yeah,
And
I
I don't
mean,
mean the content. I mean like literally these people cannot string together a sentence. And like I truly am like, you guys communicate this way and this is serious. These are the people who are in power, folks. Folks who do not know how to write an email or how to capitalize anything. And I'm not saying that just to be, a grammar, queen or whatever. But these people are dumb.
here's one last thing I'll say on that, on this point of what they dared to put in emails. Larry Summers, again, back to the guy who was the former president of Harvard. This is an actual email he sent, like put in writing in March of 2019 to.
Oh God, there's another one.
Oh, there's many. I mean, I didn't. intend to cover this one necessarily, but it's relevant to what we're talking about right now. He says, this is how it starts. I'm not leaving anything out. He says, "We talked on phone. Then, quote, I can't talk later, end quote. Didn't, like DINT, didn't think I can talk tomorrow. I said, what are you up to? She said, quote, I'm busy, end quote. I said, awfully coy you are. You like the letter U. And then I said, did you really rearrange the weekend we were going to be together because guy number 3 was coming? She said, no, his schedule changed after we changed our plans. I said, okay, I got to go. Call me when you feel like it. Tone was not of good feeling. I didn't, DINT, want to be in a gift-giving competition while being the friend without benefits, to which Epstein replies, she's smart, making you pay for past errors. Ignore the daddy, I'm going to go out with the motorcycle guy. You reacted well. Annoyed shows caring. No whining showed strength. And I want to just point out that Larry Summers was then and is now married. And he was getting dating advice from a pedophile. In writing. In writing. I'm just saying, in writing.
God, his poor wife.
Yeah, interesting story there. She's also a professor at Harvard. Apparently, some of the emails that I have not seen, but I heard mention of, are Larry Summers trying to get Epstein to give money to his wife's work, like a $500,000 donation. Anyway, there's more to that story that I haven't delved deeply into, but I think there's more to it than certainly I'm aware of at this moment.
Yeah, I don't know these people. I'm very happy to not know any of these people. And I guess we're going to learn way more about them than we ever wanted to. Great. Um I think that's enough. That was a lot of Epstein. I think that we need a palate cleanser, Arghavan. What is bringing you joy this week, cuz we need to clean the palate.
What is bringing me joy this week is this book that came out. Book day was this week for my
Ooh.
friend, Soraya Shamali. The book is All We Want Is Everything, How We Dismantle Male Supremacy.
I didn't know
So,
you two were friends.
I mean, like on the socials, I don't know her IRL, but she sent me an advance copy,
Yeah.
for which I'm
All we want
grateful.
is everything. That's fabulous. It's on my list to buy because I'm a huge fan of hers.
Well, she's amazing. So that makes sense. So yeah, that's my joy is that this book came out, and I hope that
Excellent.
everyone's going out and buying it. I'm not paid to say this. What is your joy this week?
Excellent. Well, we will put a link to that in the show notes. Um, I sent this to you earlier, so you've seen it, but there's a comedian, American, Japanese comedian named Fumi Abe, and he has a video about how his nephew, like his brother-in-law is a doctor, and so his nephew likes to like play hospital, and so I guess he like built a little Lego hospital, but that the scenes in the hospital are like way too real. So they went to go like play with with his nephew, and his nephew was like, there's no beds in the hospital. And for people who work in hospitals, you understand like bed shortages are a constant problem.
It's my nephew. He's like 2 years old. He likes to build like fake hospitals using Legos and like pretend to play hospital. It's very cute. But I realized I think it's because his dad's a doctor. His hospital scenarios that he likes to play, they're like way too real, you know? So I was like playing with him, right? And I was like, hi, I'm Mr. Bunny and I fell off my bike and I need to see the doctor. Can I go to the hospital? And he goes, okay, let me check. Oh no, we're out of beds. I was like, what the f? How do you know about that? What are you talking about? He goes, Mr. Bunny's anti-vax. I'm like, stop, please. He goes, Uncle Fufu, there's no cure for misinformation.
And I am raising children, and it is really funny when your kids hear you on the phone talking about work, the random depth of knowledge that your kids have about the banality of hospitals and the drama, it's pretty intense. And so I cackled. I thought it was so funny because it's totally something that my kids would have said.
Yes. No, you did send me that, and I thought it was hilarious, like, imagining a little toddler or however old this kid was, um, saying, "There's no beds." Very real problem. Anyway, all right, that's it for this week's episode, folks. If you didn't like what
There's
you
a
heard
drug shortage.
yeah, that's right. We don't have any more normal saline. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode. If you didn't like what you heard, this has been The Joe Rogan Show. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to The Present Illness and leave us a review and tell your friends and anyone else who will listen.
You can follow us on all the places, TikTok, Instagram, at The Present Illness, to stay on top of all of our TPI-related news.
And we'll be back next week with more headlines, hot takes, doom scrolling, and hopefully some laughs.
Until then, agitate, hydrate, take a nap, and we'll see you next time on The Present Illness. On a final note, don't take advice from random people on the internet or on your podcast. This show's for informational purposes. It's meant to be fun, and it's certainly not medical advice. So please take any medical questions you have to a qualified professional.